The city was alive with energy. Skyscrapers towered over the streets, their windows shimmering under the bright sun. Neon lights flickered on billboards while hovercars zoomed above the ground in a constant stream of movement. Despite all the hustle and bustle, Ethan's workshop was quiet, tucked away in a little corner of the city where the sounds of the outside world were muffled. It was a small, cluttered space filled with half-finished projects and the faint smell of metal and oil. The perfect place for a mechanic to get lost in his work. Ethan was known around the city for his skills, not just with engines and machinery, but also with magical devices, tools that combined science and sorcery in ways that made most people's heads spin. He could repair anything: broken drones, malfunctioning bots, even devices that seemed to belong to another time. His reputation had earned him a steady stream of customers, but none quite as strange as the one who walked in that morning. The bell above the workshop door jingled, and Ethan looked up from his workbench. Standing in the doorway was a figure in a long coat, the hood pulled low over their face, obscuring most of their features. They stepped inside without saying a word, holding a small, worn-out box in their hands. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, setting down the wrench he was holding. The figure said nothing, but wordlessly placed the box on the counter in front of him. It was a wooden crate, old and weathered, with strange markings carved into the surface. The kind of markings that seemed almost alive, as if they were moving, shifting, and changing when you weren't looking directly at them. Ethan frowned. "What is this?" he asked, examining the crate carefully. The figure finally spoke, their voice soft but firm. "I need you to fix it." No questions asked, just fix it. Ethan could tell that this was no ordinary request. He was used to working on all kinds of devices, broken appliances, vehicles, and even ancient tech, but this was different. He could feel the weight of the crate, not just physically, but in a way that seemed almost mystical. He nodded, his curiosity piqued. "All right, I'll take a look." Carefully, Ethan opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet cloth, was what looked like a dragon. Not a real dragon, of course, but a small, intricate toy, crafted with incredible attention to detail. The dragon's scales shimmered in the light, each one looking like it had been carefully painted by a master artist. Its wings were spread wide as if it were about to take flight, and its eyes, though made of glass, seemed to glow faintly. But there was something wrong with it. The dragon's tail was broken and its wings were bent out of shape. A small crack ran down its body, and some of the gears inside it had stopped working altogether. It looked as if it had been forgotten, tossed aside, and left to gather dust. Ethan picked it up gently, inspecting the delicate craftsmanship. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It didn't seem to be just a toy. It had the feel of something far older, far more powerful. He turned to the figure who was still standing silently by the door, watching him closely. "I'll get started on it," Ethan said, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had crept up on him. The figure gave a small nod but didn't speak again. Ethan wasn't sure if it was a request or a command, but it didn't matter. He was used to working alone. He set the toy dragon on his workbench and began his examination. The first thing he noticed was the complex system of gears and wires inside the dragon's body. It was clear that it was more than just a simple mechanical toy. The design was intricate, almost alien in its complexity. He ran his fingers over the surface, feeling a faint pulse of energy that seemed to vibrate from the toy itself. Ethan frowned. It was unlike any machine he had ever worked on. The energy wasn't electrical, it felt magical somehow. He pulled out a small device from his toolbox and began to scan the toy's interior, trying to find the source of the unusual energy. As the device beeped softly, it picked up a faint signal coming from deep within the toy's core. It was weak, but it was there like a heartbeat. "What the hell is this?" he muttered to himself, more intrigued than ever. He carefully began to dismantle the toy piece by piece, taking note of the odd materials it was made from. The metal was unlike anything he had ever seen, smooth and lightweight, but with an unnatural strength to it. Some of the parts seemed to glow with an inner light, while others had patterns that seemed to shift as if alive. As he worked, he felt a growing unease. The quiet in the workshop seemed to deepen, and the faint hum he had noticed earlier grew louder, as if something was resonating in the air. Ethan paused, glancing around the room. The windows were shut, and there was no one else in the workshop. "Am I losing my mind?" he muttered to himself, shaking off the unsettling feeling. He continued working, but the strange hum persisted, growing louder and more intense with each passing minute. It was as though the dragon itself was watching him, waiting for something. Suddenly, the toy's eyes flickered, glowing with an eerie light. Ethan froze, his hand hovering over the dragon's body. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then a low, whispering voice filled the air, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You should not have repaired it." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He looked around, panic rising in his chest. But there was no one there. The figure who had left the toy was long gone. The voice echoed again, this time clearer, with an unmistakable sense of power behind it. "But now that you are bound to me." Ethan's hands trembled, the wrench slipping from his fingers. He had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the weight of something ancient and powerful closing in on him. Something had been awakened in this toy, and he was now at the center of it. The room seemed to darken, the shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. Ethan had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. Ethan stood frozen, his fingers still hovering over the dragon toy on his workbench. The eerie whisper faded, but the strange feeling remained. His heart raced as he looked around the room, half expecting someone to step out of the shadows. But the workshop was as quiet as ever, the hum of his tools and the soft buzzing of the lights the only sounds. The toy's eyes had gone dark, its glow fading back to normal. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, trying to calm his nerves. "It's just a machine," he muttered to himself. "There's got to be a logical explanation for this." He picked up the toy again, turning it over in his hands. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, something powerful and ancient. The voice, that low, commanding whisper, still echoed in his mind. He needed to figure this out. Whatever this toy was, it wasn't just a toy. It had a purpose. With steady hands, he resumed his work, carefully unscrewing the delicate panels on the toy's body. His mechanical instincts kicked in, pushing aside the unease that had gripped him. He knew how to fix things. He had spent years repairing and restoring machines. But this was different. Every piece of this toy felt like it had been designed by someone, or something, that was far beyond his understanding. As Ethan removed the final panel, revealing the inner workings of the dragon toy, something caught his eye. A small inscription carved into the metal was hidden beneath the surface. It was almost invisible, but when he ran his fingers over it, the symbols seemed to shift and glow faintly. They weren't like anything he had seen before, not in any language or code he recognized. His curiosity piqued. Ethan grabbed his tablet and scanned the inscription. It didn't register. He tried a few different translation programs, but none of them could make sense of the symbols. Frustrated, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The hum in the air was still there, barely perceptible, but it had a rhythm to it now. It wasn't random, it was like a heartbeat, steady and patient, waiting. Just then, his old friend Mira called. Ethan picked up the tablet, his hand still shaking slightly. "Hey, Mira," he said, trying to sound casual. "I need your help with something." Mira's voice came through clearly, sharp as always. "What's up? You working on something cool?" "I've got this thing," Ethan began, his mind racing. "It's a toy. Well, it looks like a toy. But there's something strange about it. The design, the materials, the energy inside it, I can't figure it out." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mira was a historian and expert on ancient technologies. If anyone could help Ethan make sense of the strange symbols, it was her. "Send me a picture," she said after a moment. "I'll see what I can find." Ethan snapped a photo of the inscription with his tablet and sent it to her. Then he waited. Mira had always been good at decoding things, especially when it came to old forgotten tech. But even she might find this challenging. While waiting for her response, Ethan decided to take a closer look at the toy itself. It was larger than he had first thought, its body stretching across his workbench like a miniature dragon. The craftsmanship was flawless, but the more he stared at it, the more he felt an unsettling sense of awe. It didn't seem like something that belonged in a simple workshop. It felt like an artifact from another time, another world. After a few minutes, Mira responded. She'd been researching the symbols, and she sent back a link to an ancient database of forgotten languages. Ethan opened the link and began scrolling through it. The symbols were unlike anything in modern records, but after a bit of searching, he found a match. The language, as Mira had suspected, was a form of an ancient dialect used by a long-lost civilization that once ruled over vast swathes of the galaxy. These people had mastered both magic and technology in ways that were thought impossible. According to the texts, they had created artifacts that could control energy on a scale that was incomprehensible. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The toy was more than just a mechanical creation. It was a key to something far larger, a connection to a lost era of unimaginable power. The inscription read, "He who repairs the broken will unlock the path to the old ones." Ethan frowned. The old ones? He muttered aloud. What did that mean? Suddenly, everything clicked. The toy wasn't just an artifact, it was a relic, a remnant of an ancient race who had once ruled the stars. The old ones must have been the creators of the dragons, powerful beings who had either disappeared or been erased from history. This toy wasn't meant to be fixed by just anyone. It was meant to be fixed by someone who could unlock its secrets, someone like Ethan. As the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't just repairing a broken toy. He was unlocking something that had been hidden for centuries. He had no idea what that something was, but he could feel its weight, both in his hands and in his mind. The room seemed to grow colder. The hum in the air grew louder, and for a brief moment Ethan thought he saw the toy's eyes flash again, glowing with an ethereal light. He snapped back to attention, shaking his head. No, it was just his imagination. But then, the voice came again. You are close. You are awakening the power of the old ones. This time the voice was clearer, stronger, and it wasn't just in his head. It was real. Ethan jerked backward, the toy slipping from his hands and falling to the workbench with a soft thud. His pulse raced as the air around him seemed to crackle with energy. He wasn't alone anymore. Looking around frantically, he half expected to see someone, an ancient being, or worse, the figure who had brought the toy to him. But the workshop remained empty. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting. He picked up the dragon toy again, his hands trembling. The energy inside it was undeniable now. The toy wasn't just a mechanical creation, it was a conduit, a key to something far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He had repaired it, yes. But now he realized that his work had only just begun. There were forces at play far larger than himself, forces that had been watching him from the very beginning. And somehow, despite everything, he was in the middle of it all. Ethan stood still, the toy dragon's glowing eyes burning into his mind as a strange, unfamiliar energy pulsed around him. The air in the workshop had shifted. It felt heavier now, charged with something he couldn't quite explain. Every inch of him screamed to stop, to leave the toy alone, to forget about all of this. But Ethan couldn't do that. The pull of curiosity was far too strong, and now, he was caught in the web of something much bigger than himself. He looked down at the toy, his fingers tracing its smooth surface. The gears inside had been meticulously crafted, but there was something more, something deeper about it. Ethan could feel that it wasn't just a mechanical object. It wasn't just a toy. It was a key to a forgotten world, one that was calling to him in ways he didn't fully understand. The voice had faded, but its words echoed in his mind. You are awakening the power of the old ones. The phrase made him uneasy, and yet he couldn't bring himself to stop working on it. There was something compelling about the toy, something ancient and dangerous, but also beautiful. Ethan knew that he couldn't turn back now. The workshop was dark now, the only light coming from the toy and the faint glow of his workbench. He was alone, or at least he thought he was. But that feeling, the feeling that he was being watched, was still there. It was as if someone or something was standing just beyond the reach of his sight, waiting. Suddenly the voice returned, but this time, it wasn't in his mind. It was in the air around him, whispering from the shadows. You are not alone, Ethan. His heart raced. The toy in his hand seemed to hum with energy, vibrating slightly. It wasn't just the energy of the toy, though. Ethan could feel something else, a presence, an unseen force that was watching him, waiting for him to make his next move. He dropped the toy back onto the workbench, his hands trembling. Who's there? Ethan called out, trying to keep his voice steady. He had no idea who or what was watching him. The workshop was empty. There was no one. He had to be imagining it, but the sense of being observed was so strong, so real, that Ethan could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The room remained silent for a moment, but then the voice spoke again, clearer this time, almost as if it was speaking directly into his ear. You think you are the one who controls the toy, but it is the toy that controls you. Ethan's pulse quickened. The toy? How could it control him? It was just a machine, a relic, wasn't it? Before he could respond, a chill swept through the room and the lights flickered. For a split second, the room seemed to distort, like a ripple in reality itself. Ethan blinked, and when his eyes refocused, the toy was no longer where he had left it. Instead, it lay on the table, its wings moving ever so slightly as if it was alive. The feeling of being watched intensified. Ethan stepped back, his mind racing. What was happening? Had the toy somehow moved on its own? He had to get a grip on himself. It was just his imagination. There was no way a toy could move by itself. But then the toy's eyes glowed again, brighter this time, and a deep rumbling voice emanated from the toy itself. Not from the air. You have awoken me. Ethan froze. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was loud, powerful, and filled with ancient wisdom. The toy was speaking to him. The words seemed to come from the toy's mouth, but Ethan realized with a shock that it was not the toy itself. No, it was something else, something behind the toy. Something older and far more dangerous. For the first time, Ethan understood what the toy truly was. Not just a relic, not just a machine, but a vessel. A vessel for a being, a powerful ancient creature, whose presence was now filling the room. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The toy wasn't just a broken thing from the past. It was a prison holding something powerful, something that had been waiting to be freed. And now Ethan had unlocked the first part of that release. You were trapped inside this toy? Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. The idea seemed impossible, but the evidence was right in front of him. The toy's movements, its voice, the power that radiated from it, all of it spoke of something beyond the simple mechanics of a child's plaything. The toy's eyes flickered again. I was not trapped. I chose to remain hidden. The toy was my vessel, my protector. Ethan stepped closer, unable to tear his eyes away from the glowing dragon. What are you? Who are you? The room grew darker, the lights dimming even further. The hum in the air became louder, almost deafening. Ethan felt a strange pressure building around him, as if the very air itself was alive, tightening like a vice around his chest. The temperature dropped suddenly, and he could see his breath in front of him. The dragon's eyes burned with an ancient fiery light as it answered, I am the Dragon Lord, the last of my kind. The old ones, the ones who created this toy, they knew my power. They feared me, and so they locked me away. Ethan's mind reeled. The Dragon Lord? The last of its kind? How could that be possible? The idea of dragons was something out of myth, out of storybooks. They didn't exist in the world he knew. But standing in front of him, glowing with that intense fiery light, the toy dragon was something real, something undeniable. The Dragon Lord continued, I have watched you, Ethan, for years. You have been the one to repair the broken, to breathe life into things that were forgotten. You fixed me, and now you will help me reclaim what was once mine. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. No, this is wrong. I didn't sign up for this. I just fixed a toy. The Dragon Lord's voice grew deeper, more insistent. You do not understand. You were chosen. Your bloodline is tied to mine. You are my descendant, and together we will restore the lost empire of the dragons. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. This was impossible. How could he be connected to something as ancient as the Dragon Lord? He was just a mechanic, nothing special. Yet here he was, standing face to face with a being that had been hidden away for centuries. A being that was now waking up, eager to reclaim its power. For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of fear. He wasn't just dealing with a broken machine. He was dealing with something much bigger, something that could change everything. The Dragon Lord's glowing eyes fixed on him. You cannot hide from your destiny, Ethan. You have already awakened me. Now you must help me awaken the rest of my kind. The air in the workshop was thick with tension, like a storm was about to break. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the dragon toy now glowing with an intense fiery light. The Dragon Lord's words echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he felt as if he was caught in a whirlwind he had no control over. You have awakened me. The words echoed again, but this time they didn't just vibrate in his ears. They seemed to pulse through his very bones. Ethan's heart raced. He tried to step back, but his feet felt glued to the floor. The Dragon Lord wasn't just a toy, it was real, and it was asking for his help. But why, and why him? I didn't ask for this, Ethan muttered under his breath, his mind racing for a way out of the mess he had just found himself in. He had only wanted to fix a broken toy, not awaken some ancient being who wanted him to help take over the galaxy. The glowing eyes of the dragon continued to pierce through the dim room, its voice now calm, almost patient. You are a descendant of the creators, Ethan. The blood of the old ones runs in your veins. You are the one who will help me restore my empire. Ethan's pulse raced. He couldn't breathe. I didn't ask to be part of this, he said, his voice shaking. The Dragon Lord's eyes flickered almost as if it were amused. You cannot run from destiny, Ethan. You were born for this. The room seemed to darken further, and the hum of energy around him intensified. Ethan tried to back away again, but something was holding him there. The toy, the dragon, was somehow controlling the space around him. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive with power, a power that was now enveloping him. Suddenly, the toy's eyes flared bright with an overwhelming light, and a strange force shot out from it, hitting Ethan in the chest like a wave. He gasped for air, stumbling back against the workbench, his heart hammering in his chest. The voice of the Dragon Lord grew louder. You will pass the trials, Ethan. Only then will you be able to choose your path. If you succeed, you will be rewarded. If you fail, you will serve me. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean, trials? He asked, his voice trembling. The dragon's wings flared open, and the light around him grew even brighter. The first test will begin now. Prepare yourself. Before Ethan could even respond, the room seemed to warp, and he found himself standing in a new place. The workshop was gone. He wasn't in his familiar, cluttered space anymore. Instead, he was standing in a vast open arena surrounded by towering stone walls. The air was thick and oppressive, and the ground beneath him was solid, but uneven, as if it had been worn down by centuries of use. Ethan's eyes scanned his surroundings, his pulse racing. What had just happened? He had gone from standing in his workshop to being transported into this. You are in the arena now. The Dragon Lord's voice boomed, shaking the ground beneath Ethan's feet. To prove your worth, you must face the trials of strength, intellect, and will. Only by passing each test will you earn the right to control the power you have unleashed. Ethan's head spun. A test, what was going on? He was a mechanic. He fixed things. This wasn't his world. He wasn't some ancient hero from a forgotten galaxy. He was just a guy who worked with his hands. But the Dragon Lord's presence loomed over him, and Ethan knew that there was no turning back now. A deep rumble sounded beneath his feet, and before he could react, a massive stone door opened in front of him. From within, a growling noise echoed through the air, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as a creature emerged from the shadows. It was huge, towering over him like a living mountain. Its body was made of jagged stone, and its eyes burned with a fiery orange glow. The beast looked like a cross between a lion and a bear, with sharp claws that scraped the ground with each step it took. A giant. The creature let out a deafening roar, shaking the very walls around them. Ethan's hands trembled, but he quickly wiped the sweat from his palms. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't know how to fight. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. He quickly glanced around, looking for anything that could help him. But there was nothing. No tools, no escape routes, just him and the beast. The creature charged forward, its massive claws reaching for him. Ethan barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side just in time. His heart was racing, and his body was screaming for him to run, to escape. But there was nowhere to go. The only way out was through. The Dragon Lord's voice echoed in the arena again. The test of strength is simple, Ethan. Defeat this creature and you will prove your worth. Defeat it? Ethan's stomach churned. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a soldier. He was a mechanic. What was he supposed to do against a creature like that? The creature snarled and charged again, faster this time. Ethan dodged to the side once more, his mind scrambling for a solution. He needed to think, needed to use his head. The dragon hadn't given him a weapon, but he had his skills, his ability to see things others couldn't. He spotted a loose piece of metal in the corner of the arena. It was small, but it could work. He ran toward it, grabbing it with both hands. It wasn't much, but it was something. The giant creature lunged at him again, but this time Ethan was ready. As the creature swung its claw down, Ethan ducked, using the metal piece to block the attack. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through his arms, but the metal held. Ethan didn't wait for a second strike. He darted forward, using his momentum to strike at the creature's underbelly. The creature howled in pain as the metal found its mark, and Ethan quickly followed up with another blow. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't clean, but it was enough. The creature staggered back, and with one final swing, Ethan knocked it to the ground. Breathing heavily, Ethan stood over the fallen beast, his body shaking. He had done it. He had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. The arena shifted again, the ground beneath him rumbling once more. "You have passed the first test," the Dragon Lord's voice said, but it lacked the warmth of approval. "You may have defeated the creature, but there are more trials to come, and they will test you in ways you cannot yet understand." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had passed the test, but he knew the hardest challenges were still ahead. He didn't know how much more he could handle. But one thing was clear: he had no choice but to keep going. The Dragon Lord's presence loomed over him like an invisible force, and Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. The real tests were still to come. The ground beneath Ethan's feet rumbled as the arena shifted again. The battle with the stone giant had barely ended, and already a new challenge was looming before him. His body ached from the fight, his arms sore and his breath ragged. He had barely processed what had just happened, how he, a simple mechanic, had managed to defeat a creature far stronger than himself. But it wasn't over. The voice of the Dragon Lord echoed once more, its tone as cold and commanding as ever. "You have passed the first test, Ethan, but do not grow complacent. The hardest trials lie ahead." Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead, his heart still racing. He had survived, but at what cost? The air around him felt heavy, as if it were waiting for something. He glanced around, hoping for some sign of what was to come next. But the arena was still, the walls, the ground, the sky above him, all remained unchanged. The Dragon Lord's voice came again, this time more distant, as if coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "The second test will challenge your mind, Ethan. You will face an enemy of your own making, a reflection of your deepest fears. If you fail, you will never escape." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His deepest fears? What did that mean? He had faced a giant before, but what could possibly scare him more than that? What kind of challenge awaited him now? Before he could even think, the ground trembled once more, and the air around him grew cold. He looked up just in time to see the sky darken, swirling clouds forming overhead. A shadow moved within those clouds, something massive and terrifying. The temperature dropped rapidly, and Ethan shivered as the storm above him seemed to grow closer, darker and more oppressive. Then through the clouds, something began to emerge. A massive shape, far larger than anything Ethan had seen so far, descended from the sky. It was a creature, but not like the stone giant. This one was made of swirling shadows, its body shifting like smoke and flame, with eyes that glowed a deep, menacing red. Ethan stumbled back, his mind racing. He had no idea what this thing was, but he could feel its power radiating toward him. It wasn't just a creature, it was a manifestation of something darker, something that knew him. The shadow creature moved closer, and Ethan's heart raced with a mix of fear and realization. "This is your reflection, Ethan," the Dragon Lord's voice boomed, louder than ever. "The second test is a battle against yourself. Face it, or you will remain trapped forever." Ethan's blood ran cold. This creature, it wasn't just some enemy. It was a part of him, a reflection of his own fear. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. The shadow creature loomed over him, its glowing red eyes staring down at him. Its shape shifted, distorting like smoke in the wind. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged, razor-sharp teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl. Ethan's legs were shaking. He wanted to run. He wanted to escape this nightmare. But he couldn't. The Dragon Lord had said it. This creature was a reflection of his deepest fears. And no matter how much he wanted to avoid it, he had to face it. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't someone who fought monsters. He was just a mechanic, a fixer of broken things. He had fixed machines, sure, but how did you fix a monster born from your worst nightmares? But then it clicked. The key to facing this creature wasn't strength. It wasn't brute force. It was understanding. He had to understand what it represented. Ethan clenched his fists, his body trembling. The shadow creature circled him, its presence pressing in on all sides. It was a part of him, a manifestation of his fear, and it had to be faced. "I'm not afraid of you," Ethan said through gritted teeth, though his voice wavered. He wasn't sure if he believed it, but he had to try. "You're just a part of my mind. You can't control me." The shadow creature's eyes narrowed, and it let out a low growl that shook the ground beneath Ethan's feet. It was testing him, pushing him, trying to break his resolve. But Ethan didn't back down. He refused to let his fear control him. As the creature lunged toward him, Ethan's instincts kicked in. He didn't try to dodge. Instead, he stepped forward, meeting the creature head-on. He was no warrior, but he was a mechanic, and mechanics fixed things. He knew that to fix something, you had to understand its inner workings, its weaknesses. The creature's shadowy form began to waver, and for the briefest moment, Ethan saw something, the reflection of his own fear. It wasn't the creature that was powerful. It was the fear inside him that gave it strength. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, focusing. He remembered his training, his years spent taking apart machines, understanding them piece by piece. He realized that the shadow creature wasn't just a thing to fight. It was something to understand, to dismantle like any broken object. When he opened his eyes again, his fear had begun to subside. The creature's shape wavered again, flickering like a faulty hologram. Ethan reached out, and with a sudden burst of clarity, he grabbed hold of it. As he did, the shadow creature dissolved, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind, fading away until it was nothing more than a memory. The air around him grew still, the dark storm above vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Ethan stood, breathing heavily, his body trembling with the aftermath of the fight. "You have passed the second test," the Dragon Lord's voice echoed, sounding almost approving. "You have faced your fear and won. But there is still one more test." Ethan wiped his brow, his heart still racing. He had done it. He had faced something that he never thought he could, his own fear, and come out victorious. But the Dragon Lord's words made it clear. The trials weren't over yet. "The final test will test your will," the Dragon Lord continued. "If you pass, you will be free. If you fail—" The voice trailed off, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Ethan took a deep breath, his body sore and battered from the trials. He had come this far. He couldn't stop now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble again, and Ethan knew that the final test was about to begin.